Good morning, church family. Today we're continuing through our daily Devo series, walking through the Gospel of Matthew. And today's passage probably seems really familiar, whether it be because it's a miracle that's often taught upon or because it's very, very similar to a story that Pastor Mark taught on in his daily Devo video this Monday. So let's look into it. So the story we're talking about is the feeding of the 4,000. And some theologians believe that maybe this is just a reiteration of the same miracle. But also the argument is made that it is not, that it is two separate stories. And that's what we'll see. When we look at the geographical context of what precedes, we'll see that this isn't just a repeat telling of the same miracle, but a repeat of a similar miracle. If we look in the verses leading up to this miracle, we see that Jesus had been traveling through what is known as the Decapolis, this collection of 10 cities that are heavily Gentile cities, Greek cities. And he's been traveling through them. He had this experience with the Canaanite woman, and then he's continuing now along the Sea of Galilee, still in geographical areas that are heavily expected to be Gentile areas. And what that leads many theologians to conclude is that this current miracle is a very similar miracle, but is to a different audience. The feeding of the 5,000 was to a Jewish audience. He performed this miracle before the Jewish people. This circumstance of the feeding of the 4,000 most likely had a Gentile audience. So Jesus was repeating the same miracle, but revealing it to a different people group, revealing to them the same power that he has to provide. And so this repeat of a miracle is so cool and incredible, not just because it once again showed God's power, showed the power of Jesus, but it also showed that Jesus was extending it not just to the Jews. He was extending this provision, this miracle, not just to the Jews, but to the Gentiles as well. And here's another note that we see. If we look in this passage, let's look at how the disciples respond when Jesus is proposing feeding these people. And the disciples said to him, "Where are we to get enough bread, in such a desolate place, to feed so great a crowd?" And Jesus said to them, "How many loaves do you have?" They said, 7 and a few small fish. So what we see here is the disciples, even though they had literally, in our story, in the Gospel of Matthew, a chapter earlier, and who knows, but we know is recently they've seen Jesus feed the 5,000, but still they have their questions and they have their doubts. And there's some explanations for this. It could just be plain old simple. They had kind of, in their fear and their belief of their own ability, allowed themselves to forget what Jesus had already done and be in fear again. But a more likely explanation is, like we see Jesus doing a lot of things of his leading of the disciples. There's oftentimes he would perform miracles, he would teach, and then he would charge them to do the same. Their fear could have been, "Oh, Jesus, are you expecting us to do what you did? Are you expecting us to find a way to miraculously feed these people? Are we supposed to somehow multiply this fish and these loaves of bread?" And either way, what we see is we see doubt and fear. We see that the disciples still are not fully resting in faith that Jesus has the ability to provide and the ability to work through them, to allow them to perform miracles, to teach, and to have miraculous provision for people. They're doubting the ability of Christ to move and to provide, and to move and provide through them. And that's what I want to end with on this passage. Is we see once again a very similar miracle where the people are fed and fed to an abundance, where it recounts thousands of people being fed, and it recounts that leftovers were collected. So we see that Jesus doesn't just provide, but provides to an abundance with the little that was provided. And what I want us, the challenge I want us to see is that when we are faithful to provide and fully surrender our little, the power of Christ in us, the Spirit in us, God leading us, can do far greater than we ever imagined. And we're often like the disciples. We often limit it. We often limit what we believe Jesus can do in us. We often limit what he can provide with our little. But if we're faithful to surrender it, if we're faithful to trust and give it over to him so that he can move in it, he will do amazing things. So church family, that's my challenge for us, is that we would continue to remember God's past provision and continue to trust him with the little, with the unexpected, and just continue to give him what we have. Surrender it to him with open hands and trust that he'll move in ways we never expect. Have a great day, church family.